Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Files, Secrets They Don't Want Revealed, the channel where we peel back the layers of history, revealing what lies beneath the surface, the files buried, the testimonies silenced, and the stories governments hoped would never be told. Tonight, we're going deep into the humid, haunted jungles of Vietnam, into a story that begins with a simple mistake, a misfiled document in a Pentagon archive, and ends with one of the most unsettling discoveries of modern military history. This is the story of the Dead Man's Diary, the recovered journal of Private James Lowery, a man whose final words would remain hidden for 40 years, locked behind the steel vaults of secrecy. In 2015, during a routine digital conversion of Cold War-era materials, an archivist named Daniel McCreary stumbled upon a mislabeled file buried inside a restricted storage section at the Pentagon. The label read, Logistics Equipment Reports, SEA Region, 1972. Inside that folder was something no one expected. A small, decayed field notebook wrapped in wax paper, sealed with military tape, and tagged confidential. Its pages were warped, its ink faded, but the words were still legible. The first line read, Private First Class James Lowery, 3rd Recon Battalion, Quang Tri Province. If anyone finds this, tell my mother I did what I had to. What followed wasn't a normal field log. It was a chronicle of operations that, to this day, remain officially unacknowledged. Operations involving biological testing, experimental radio frequencies, and encounters with something Lowery described as alive, but not human. At first, McCreary thought it was a fake, a soldier's delusional ramblings. But when cross-referenced with other classified reports, names and dates, something horrifying emerged. Lowery had indeed served in the 3rd Recon Battalion. His name appeared on a casualty list dated June 4, 1972. Official cause, fatal gunfire, friendly incident. But according to the diary, that's not what happened. Lowery's early entries are mundane, recounting patrol routes, supply drops, and the exhausting monotony of jungle warfare. But beginning in February 1972, his tone changes. He writes about being transferred to a classified program called Project Rook. His orders came from a Colonel Harlan Reeves, a name that does appear in declassified fragments of communication from the era, connected to psychological and chemical operations in Indochina. Lowery writes, We were told Project Rook was reconnaissance support. Deep insertion behind enemy lines, mapping radio interference zones. But they didn't tell us what the interference was coming from. For several weeks, the entries describe strange transmissions picked up on shortwave radios, rhythmic pulses, repeating sequences of 3 notes, followed by static that sounded like breathing. Local villagers, when questioned, referred to certain areas as the Forest of the Dead. They warned soldiers never to enter them at night. But the orders came from the top: investigate, document, report. By March 10, 1972, Lowery writes of being stationed at a temporary camp near the Laotian border, alongside 6 men and 2 civilian observers, wearing no insignia. The observers carried instruments he didn't recognize, strange, metallic boxes with wires and glass tubes. They spoke little, but one of them, a woman named Dr. Karen Sue, occasionally sketched in a notebook, whispering numbers to herself. Then, on March 14, the tone shifts entirely. Lowery describes an incident during night watch. His entry reads, The jungle was alive tonight. Not in the normal way. The cicadas stopped. Even the frogs went silent. There was this low hum, deep like the sound before a storm. Something passed by the perimeter. Motion sensors went off. We fired flares. For a second I saw something. It was tall. Wrong. Like the trees moved but didn't move. The air rippled. Private Keenan fired 3 rounds, and then the hum stopped. The next day, Lowery's team found Keenan dead, no visible wounds, eyes wide open, his body frozen in rigor. The medics couldn't explain it. The report simply says, sudden cardiac arrest. Lowery writes, They took him away that morning. No body bag, just a black tarp. Dr. Sue took samples from his skin. I asked what for. She said, he saw something his mind couldn't process. That line became one of the most quoted phrases in later analyses of the diary. Something his mind couldn't process. It hinted that what Lowery's unit encountered wasn't just physical, it affected consciousness itself. Weeks later, his entries describe the construction of a base within a cave system that locals refused to enter. The men joked it was cursed. Inside, they discovered strange metallic fragments embedded in the rock, not shrapnel, not natural mineral. One technician remarked they looked manufactured. The fragments emitted a faint electrical charge even when disconnected from equipment. Lowery overheard Colonel Reeves saying, "If this proves stable, we're looking at non-terrestrial material." The diary grows darker. He begins to write about prisoners, captured Viet Cong soldiers and villagers brought into the camp. He describes how the civilian observers administered drugs and exposed them to energy emitted from the fragments. The subjects screamed, convulsed, and bled from their eyes and ears. One line simply reads, "They were trying to make the jungle talk." That phrase appears again and again, in different forms. The jungle knows. It remembers. It reacts. Lowery reports that after each experiment, the vegetation near the cave seemed to change. Leaves grew black veins, roots exuded a tar-like fluid, and birds avoided the area entirely. On April 22, 1972, the experiments stopped abruptly. 2 scientists were found dead, their skin covered in burns that glowed faintly in the dark. Command ordered an immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel. Lowery and 5 others were reassigned to escort a retrieval team into the deeper jungle to recover classified assets. The diary's most terrifying sequence begins here. Lowery writes, "We hiked for 2 days. On the 3rd night, we reached a valley filled with fog so thick it glowed under moonlight. It wasn't fog. It was moving too slow, like it had weight. I touched it. My fingers went numb. Private Ellis vomited blood that looked black in the light." The next page is smeared, but one sentence remains legible. Something was breathing beneath the ground. From that point forward, Lowery's entries become increasingly fragmented, sentences breaking apart, handwriting trembling. He describes shapes moving in the mist, sounds that seem to echo inside his skull. He reports hearing his mother's voice calling his name, though no one else did. "One night," he writes, "we lost the radio. We lost the map. We're walking in circles. The compass spins like crazy. The jungle isn't the same anymore. Trees shift when you turn around. Shadows move where there's no light. It wants us to stay." Then comes the entry dated May 11, 1972. "Ellis shot himself today. He said the jungle was whispering his name. When we found him, his mouth was full of soil, but he hadn't fallen. The earth climbed into him." Lowery's mental state deteriorates visibly in the writing. His script becomes jagged. He starts referring to himself in 3rd person. He writes that the air hums at night, that the sound vibrates his teeth. He dreams of the thing that walked through the camp that first night, now taller, clearer, more defined. He says it has eyes like whetstone, and skin that looks like the inside of a leaf. There's one especially chilling passage. Dr. Seuss said it wasn't alive, not in the way we think. It's something that adapts, learns from us. It mimics. When it touched the prisoners, it started to look human. When it touched us, it learned fear. According to the timeline reconstructed later by analysts, Lowery's last radio transmission occurred on May 23. It was intercepted by a nearby unit but heavily distorted. Only fragments could be heard. "Do not follow, it's not the jungle anymore." After that, silence. Lowery's final entry is dated June 3, 1972, the day before his recorded death. It reads, "They're burning everything. Reeves says it's containment. But the fire won't spread. The jungle refuses to burn. Sue's gone. I think she became part of it. I keep hearing the hum even when I cover my ears. If anyone finds this, tell the world, we woke it up. And it's still here." The next day, according to official military reports, the area was hit with a massive aerial bombardment, allegedly to destroy an enemy weapons depot. But satellite thermal imagery from that day, declassified in 2010, shows something strange, a circular heat signature roughly 400 meters wide that lingered for hours after the bombing stopped, centered exactly where Lowery's team had last reported. No bodies were ever recovered.
The notebook ends there.
But the story doesn't. When the diary was rediscovered in 2015, it was analyzed by linguists, forensic experts, and military historians. The paper stock and ink matched standard issue from 1972. The handwriting was verified as consistent with other surviving samples from Lowery's letters home. But one detail confused analysts: trace chemical residue on the pages, a compound containing isotopes not naturally found in that region. The report was quietly classified again, and only a few photocopied excerpts leaked to the public. Whistleblowers within the archival division claimed the Pentagon suppressed the diary because it alluded to classified operations involving biological weapons research and possible non-human entities. Others believe it was covered up because it confirmed psychological warfare experiments using hallucinogenic frequencies that might have driven soldiers insane. But among veterans, another explanation circulates: that the jungle of Vietnam itself became contaminated, alive, aware, changed by what humans did there. Some years after the discovery, local villagers near Quang Tri began reporting new phenomena: patches of land where no vegetation grows, places where compasses spin wildly, where animals refuse to enter. One farmer described hearing voices under the ground. Another said that when he cut down a tree, dark fluid seeped from it that smelled like metal. Coincidence? Or something deeper, the residue of what Lowery called the awakening. In 2018, investigative journalist Raymond Holt managed to obtain several declassified memos referring to Operation Morningstar, which appears to have replaced Project Rook after 1972. One memo mentions the containment and observation of residual environmental anomalies in SEA region. Another explicitly references behavioral contamination among personnel exposed to Rookfield sites. Behavioral contamination. A clinical term for something that sounds like possession. Could it be that the entity Lowery described was not physical at all, but something that infected the human mind, a living pattern, a signal that replicates through thought? It's speculation, but one memo written by Colonel Reeves himself, recovered from a private estate auction after his death in 1991, contains a handwritten note. It learns through us. Not against us. Through us. Whatever Project Rook discovered, it terrified its own creators. Every trace of it was destroyed, its witnesses silenced. Lowery's diary survived only because someone, perhaps intentionally, misfiled it under logistics paperwork. A clerical error that turned into a revelation. And yet, the story may not be over. Satellite imaging conducted by independent researchers in 2019 revealed unusual electromagnetic activity near the original site, consistent with intermittent bursts of radiation. When investigators attempted to visit, local authorities declared the area off-limits, citing unexploded ordnance hazards. Unofficially, villagers still avoid it. They call it the valley that hums.
So what did Private James Lowery see in 1972?
Was it a hallucination caused by trauma, chemical exposure, or fear? Or was it something far older, something that had been sleeping beneath the jungle long before humans arrived, awakened by war? When you read his words, you feel his terror, but also his clarity. He wasn't raving. He was documenting, observing. A soldier trained to follow orders, now struggling to describe the indescribable. His diary ends, but his question lingers. We woke it up. And it's still here. Maybe that's why the Pentagon kept the diary secret for so long. Not because it revealed crimes, but because it revealed something they couldn't control. Something that might still be alive. When archivist Daniel McCreary spoke anonymously to a reporter in 2016, he said, "When I touched those pages, I felt it. The air in the room changed. Like the jungle was breathing through the paper." Shortly after that statement, McCreary resigned from his position. He moved overseas and has not given another interview since. To this day, the Lowery diary remains officially unverified, locked once again in restricted archives. But fragments circulate online, grainy scans, partial transcriptions. Some researchers claim to hear a faint background hum in the digitized audio recordings associated with the file, though others dismiss it as digital noise. Still, sometimes I wonder. When I first read those pages, I felt the same unease Lowery must have felt in that jungle, that sensation of being watched by something ancient and unseen. Maybe that's why his words resonate across decades.
Because Wardo n'était juste destroy lives.
Sometimes, it opens doors. Doors we were never meant to open. And once something crosses through, once it learns our language, our fear, it never really leaves. That, my friends, is the story of the dead man's diary, a soldier's warning buried beneath bureaucracy, rediscovered only because of chance. A story that forces us to ask, how much of history is truly forgotten? And how much is deliberately erased? If this story has made you question what really happened in those jungles, then you know what to do. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who isn't afraid of the truth, and leave a comment below. What do you believe came out of the jungle that night? Was it a weapon? A creature? Or something beyond even human comprehension? Thank you for watching Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep questioning, and remember.
The shadow always did the truth. Until Someone dare to look.